Eventually, if you have been in touch with us before, you are familiar with CALDO. However, as general information, CALDO is an office that was created by a group of Canadian universities that have a special interest in the Latin American market for graduate students. We are present in several markets, as you will see in the next slide. And our office aims to provide assistance to students that are interested in getting to know more about graduate programs at CALDO Universities and the admission process. And the webinar for today is focused only on the admission process. So we will not be talking about the CALDO Universities, nor will we be talking about the graduate programs. We will be talking about how to gain admission into a graduate program in general. Most of the contact with our office is made by email, and you will see that the contact that you should write to is mentioned at the end of the presentation so that you can reach out to us if you haven't done so before. Right now, we are present in 8 countries in North, Central, and South America. We are hoping that very soon we will have also Panama joining the list of countries where we work with. So that's something that should happen in the first half of 2019. Currently, we are present in Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Mexico, Paraguay, Peru, and Uruguay. And we have specific agreements with scholarship agencies from each of these countries that provide scholarships for students to come to Canada and study graduate programs. Mostly, we are talking about master's and PhD programs. Some scholarships also offer the possibility of studying postdoctoral studies or visiting programs like visiting PhD and master programs. The CALDO group is comprised of 9 universities. You see on this slide the universities that are currently members of CALDO. So the University of Alberta, Calgary, Dalhousie. Laval is the university that sits in the French-speaking province of Canada. So it's the university that offers the most options for French-speaking programs. University of Ottawa is located in the capital city of the country, and it offers the most number of programs in either English or French. And then the rest of the universities, Saskatchewan, Toronto, Waterloo, Western, and also Alberta and Calgary and Dalhousie offer programs mostly in English. If you want to know more about our universities, I would advise you to go to our website because we have a very comprehensive section on each of the universities that you will find under the topic Our Universities. So talking about the Canadian academic system, if you have a licenciatura from your home country, you are able to apply to a master program. It's very unlikely that you are able to gain admission into a PhD directly from a licenciatura. So usually you will need to have a master degree. So if that's not the case, if you don't yet have a master degree from your home country, I would like to talk a bit about what are the options for master programs in our universities. So the universities offer 2 types of master programs: master with thesis, called thesis-based masters, and course-based masters, which are masters that don't have a research. This last group, the course-based masters, are usually not the best route or the best option if you want to leave the door open for a PhD afterwards, because it does not include research. So if you want to leave the door open to do a PhD program afterwards, you should opt for the thesis-based master. The thesis-based master usually takes 2 years. In the first year, you take classes, and in the second year, you do your research, so you do your thesis. The course-based masters usually take between 1 and 1.5 years. Some might take 2 years if they might involve a small project, but most of them are within 18 months. If you already have a master degree, you can apply to a PhD program. So the PhD program usually takes 4 years, and they are very research-oriented, meaning that you will need to have experience doing research. That's why most professors want students that have the ability to have previous research experience, so that when they get to the PhD, they are familiar with at least the basic protocols for doing research. The agencies that we work with in the different countries, and most of them offer scholarships for PhD programs, and some offer for master programs. In terms of the CALDO service, our services are free. So the CALDO is not a private entity or a private office. We are part of the universities that created CALDO, and because of that, our services are totally free. Once you get in touch with us, usually by email, we are able to provide you information on the programs from our universities, as well as for the admission requirements from the different programs. We are also able, in case you are considering to apply for financing from your home country, to support you in how to contact a supervisor. So how to identify a supervisor, what documents to provide to the professors, and how to write specific documents so that the professors are interested in knowing more about yourself. So these are the two big services that CALDO provides. CALDO is not an application platform. We are an information platform, meaning that you don't apply to the programs via CALDO. You get information via CALDO so that you can define which program you want to apply to, and then you apply regularly like any other student in the university website. So let's now go into the admission requirements, and mostly what are the most what are the things that most candidates need to present when they apply to a graduate program. Like I mentioned previously, if you want to apply to a master program, you need to have what is equivalent to a 4-year bachelor's in Canada. Usually, if you studied in one of our partner countries, if you have a licenciatura that lasted 4 or more years, usually this criteria is already fulfilled. So you don't need anything else. You just need to have then the academic average that the program requires. For a PhD, the minimum requirements usually are a research-based master's. So as long as you have a research-based master's from your home country, once again with the necessary minimum GPA that the program requires, you're able to apply to a doctoral program. In terms of the GPA, so the academic average, obviously the different countries have different rating scales. So it's not, sometimes it may not be very easy for you to have an idea of how to get the equivalencies from your grade into the Canadian system. The Canadian system works on a 4-point GPA scale, which means that usually you will see the GPA reflected as a 3 or a 3.3, which does not necessarily corresponds to the same scale that you use in your country. So the way that you should do this is work with percentages. So usually for you to apply to a graduate program, your academic average should be higher than 75% of the overall range of grades that you have in your country. Some of the universities, and that's something that it's available in the CALDO website, have equivalency scales that will enable you to get an idea of what is the grade that you need in your own country. So the box or the table that you see there with different requirements for the different countries are something that you can check for some of our universities. However, please note that that's not entirely accurate for all programs. Some departments might have higher requirements than others. So it's always good to confirm with the department that you're interested, which is the level of, which is the grade that they require for the program that you're interested in. And all of this information is online. One other thing that you need to take into consideration is the language test. In the language test, you can opt for English-speaking programs or French-speaking programs, depending on the university. And for the language, for the English language, the most common tests are the TOEFL and the IELTS. The TOEFL will need to be the version IBT, so it's the internet-based test. That's the only version that is accepted for graduate studies. There's also the paper-based test, but that's, from my understanding, is no longer available. So you will always do it on the computer for the TOEFL. Some candidates have the ITP version, and that's not accepted. So make sure that you have the correct one. You can also have an IELTS test, and the IELTS needs to be the academic version, meaning that if you have the IELTS general, once again, that's not accepted because the general is more for immigration purposes. There is no score that it's good for all programs. So all programs have different requirements for the language skills. So you will find that depending on the program that you're interested and the university, the scores vary. But I would say that for most programs, if you have a TOEFL higher than 90, and the maximum is 120, so if you have between 90 and 120, that's a pretty good score. And for the IELTS, if you have a score higher than 7 and the maximum is 9, so between 7 and 9, that's also a good score. If you're interested in French-speaking programs, you might need to take the TFI, the DALF, or the DELF tests. So as I mentioned previously, the university that offers programs in French is Laval, and Ottawa also offers several programs in French. So those would be the only two options if you want to take French-speaking graduate programs. In terms of additional tests, it's not very common for programs to have the GRE as a requirement. However, specific departments do require this test, mainly at the management and business program, for the management and business programs. So if you're interested in MBA or a master's in management or a master's in international finance, something that relates to business and management, you most definitely will need the GRE or the GMAT. And there are also specific programs that, because there is so much competition, the universities include additional tests. So, for example, computer science and mathematics are programs for which you would need to have information on GRE scores for some universities. So, in the case that you're interested in applying to this type of programs, it's very important that you make sure that if you need a GRE or a GMAT test. Another program that comes to mind is also physics. So some graduate programs in physics also require the GRE. Something to pay attention and to make sure that you don't miss is the deadlines. All programs have specific deadlines that candidates need to pay attention. And these deadlines are usually hard deadlines, which means that if they pass, there is very little chance that you're able to submit an application for the period for the starting date that you were initially intending. Usually, if you're applying for the September start date, which is the most common start date in the Canadian universities, international candidates need to submit an application usually between December and March. If you're interested in starting in January, which is the second most common start date, the application deadlines are usually mid-year, so between April and June. However, once again, this depends on the programs. So you need to make sure that you know exactly which is the date of the program that you're interested in applying to, so that you don't miss the deadline. And all of the information that I'm mentioning here is available online. So it's just a matter of you basically going into the university website and retrieving the information. If you're not able to do that, we can assist you at the CALDO office. For research-based programs, you might need to have a supervisor before you apply, especially if you're applying to a PhD. This is always the case. You should always have a supervisor that is able to, or that is interested in working with you before you apply. The supervisor is a professor that is doing research on your field of interest and is someone that is essential for making sure that your research is done appropriately based on Canadian standards of the CALDO Universities. You might have, in some cases, co-supervisors, so you can have more than one supervisor, or if you're doing, for example, research in your home country and you want to do a visiting research in Canada, you would have a supervisor in your home country and a supervisor here. Contacting a supervisor is a process that requires time and persistence. So don't expect to send an email and receive a reply right away. Sometimes you might send an email and you need to send a follow-up just to get an initial reply. So if the professor is someone that you're really interested in working with, make sure that you give enough time for the person to answer. So if you send an email, wait at least 1 week for a reply. If nothing happens, send a follow-up email and explain why you're really interested in studying with that professor to see if you can get a reply. Please note that you should have more than one option of supervisors, because obviously if the professor is very popular, he may not have room for additional students, or he may just not have the availability to supervise students during specific years. The documents that you need to put together for the application are usually the ones listed on this slide. So you will have your transcript. So your transcript are your constância de notas or histórico de notas. The transcript needs to be provided in the original version and also translated into English or French by an official translator in your home country. You will need to have the scores of a language test, like we mentioned in the previous slides. You need to have a statement of research, and we will talk a bit more about this. The statement of research basically is just a 1 to 2 page document where you are explaining the professor why you want to work with that particular professor. You have to have your CV formatted to the Canadian model. So there's references on how to do that in the CALDO website. And you may need to provide contact of references that the university in Canada can contact. So usually these references should be academic references, so people that know you from the standpoint of a student or a researcher. Usually you need 3 references, so you can do a mix of 2 academic references and 1 professional. Usually it's always best to give more academic references than professional, because you're not applying for a job, you're applying for a graduate program. So academic references are more valued in this particular context. So the transcript, in case you are not entirely sure what it is a document that is similar to the one that you see on the screen. Basically, is a document that has the courses that you attended and the grades per course. In the end, it should indicate the average. And if it does not, please make sure to include that information in additional documents that you submit to the university. Usually universities, they have conversion scales for international students, so you don't need to be converting anything. You just need to provide the original versions of your documents. Talking about the statement of research. So the statement of research, like I said, is a document that should have no more than 2 pages, and where you are going to describe what is your research interest to the professor and also why you want to work with that particular professor. So some tips to make sure that you include in your statement of research are mentioned here. So make sure that you address the professor in a formal way. Tell them why you're interested in studying with them. So make sure that you know about the research that they did or that they are doing, any papers that they have published, scientific articles, magazines, or book chapters that they have published. Inform the professor if you're thinking on applying to funding from your own country. So that's something extremely valuable for them. Let them know what is your research interest. So what is your you don't yet need to have a project, but you should have an idea. So you need to explain that idea, and explain that idea in 1 to 2 paragraphs. So you don't need to elaborate with too much detail. And close the letter by offering an opportunity to connect with the professor via Skype call or phone call or an exchange of emails. Some things to avoid putting in your statement of research. Don't copy paste things that you've seen online. So personalizing your message is essential in this case, because you are trying to establish a relationship with someone that you might be working for 2 or 4 years or 5 years. So it's important that you are able to personalize your message to the professor. Don't send the same message to several people. Obviously, if you're doing that, professors will probably, some professors will probably not be interested in working with you because you're not formatting the message to that particular professor. And don't expect an immediate reply. So, like I said, wait at least 1 week, and then if nothing happens, do a follow-up. The Canadian academic CV is a very standard model. So you have information in the CALDO website about the template of the CV, and you will notice that there is no indication of personal information outside of name, email, and a phone contact. So there's no address, there's no pictures, there's no marital status. So nothing of that should be included in the CV. Instead, you should put a lot of detail in your academic qualifications, as well as any prizes or articles or scientific publications that you have been involved with. The CALDO website is an excellent source of tools for people that are starting to become familiar with how to apply to a graduate program, and offer several tools that allow you to make sure that your application is successful. In our website, we have a section called Tools to Apply, where you can have access to several resources of elements that we talked in this presentation. So just make sure to check it out, because that will probably reply to several of your questions. This is what that section looks like. And as you can see, there are different boxes dedicated to different topics, for which you will find the answer to most of the frequently asked questions that students have. For more personalized questions, you can send an email to graduate.coordinator@caldo.ca, and we are able to answer most of the questions that you have. If we are not, then we will put you in contact with the staff at our member universities for further assistance. Now that we have gone through the main presentation, I am going to open the room for the chat. The chat, from what I've been noticing, has already some questions. So what I will do is I will scroll back to see which questions were asked, and I will not be answering repeated questions. So probably some questions might be similar. So I will answer the first question that I see, and if I see the same question repeated, I will not answer that question, because obviously I've answered it before. So let me just see what are the... So I think the first question here is from Gabriela. She is asking if you can apply with a bachelor degree. So Gabriela, if your bachelor degree is equivalent to a 4-year program, you should be able to apply to a master program. Okay, so like I said before, students with licenciatura or bacharelado, they are able to apply to a master program. But make sure that the bacharelado is at least 4 years of duration, because if it's 3, then that's not equivalent to the Canadian standard. GPA, Hugo is asking, GPA is the academic average, is the grade point average, which is basically your promedio or your media, the licenciatura. So Luis is asking if there is only assistance online, or if there is someone to talk to us, like I'm imagining an office or a phone call. So if you call our office, there is someone to talk to you. However, we don't have any offices outside of Ottawa. So we are only located in Canada, and that's our only location. However, if you are able to meet us while we are at fairs, you might be able to talk in person with one of our representatives from CALDO or from the universities, because we are frequently in fairs in the different countries. For you to keep an eye out for where we will be, just follow our Facebook or go to our website, the news section. Everything is advertised there. So Diego is asking if the first certificate in English is accepted. I don't think it is, because in most of the cases, universities tend to opt for the most common tests like the TOEFL or the IELTS. However, if you want to double check, you can always browse the department website and see which are the language tests that they accept. If you're not able to find that information, you can contact us and we will try to assist you. Joanna is asking how do we provide guidance? So, like I mentioned at the beginning, we mostly provide support via email. So you can send us information on what are you interested in studying abroad, and we will provide you an overview of what our universities offer in that field. And afterwards, based on the information that you provide us, we can give you more data on admission requirements and other questions that you may have. Let me see. So Anna is asking, if you spent 1 year studying in the US, can you ask for an English exemption? So Anna, I think the answer to your question depends on how many credits you took, because there's definitely a criteria that states that if you've done studies in an English language country or university, you may be exempted from the language requirements. However, there's a minimum number of credits that you need to take in order to be exempted. So we would need to confirm that with the universities. Aude is asking if the deadlines are for all the universities, more specifically those deadlines. So like I said, Aude, the deadlines, they are not even defined by university, they are defined by program. So each program has its own deadlines. So you need to basically validate exactly which is the program that you're looking and confirm which is the deadline of that program. And by replying to this, I already replied to James' question, the deadlines for master program. So once again, it depends. Aude is asking where she can take the GRE in Colombia. I don't know. The GRE is a test that is managed by worldwide. So if you look online, GRE test in Colombia, I'm pretty sure that you will see all the test centers where you can take the test. So it's just a matter of doing an online search for GRE in Colombia test centers, and you will see definitely the dates and the times. So Aude is asking if there are tips for the statement of research. Yes, go to the tools to apply in our website. There's a big section there about the statement of research. How many references? So usually you need 3 references. Andres, what is a good GRE score? So Andres, sorry. There is no good GRE score for all programs. So depending on the program that you're applying, some of them don't even mention a minimum level of GRE. So they basically compare all the applicants from that particular cohort, and they will compare each other. So obviously they will define that the ones that have the highest will have a better chance of being admitted, but it all depends on basically the competition. So let me see here, more questions that I can answer. So just as a general tip, During these presentations, I'm not able to answer specific admission requirements for programs because, like you have noticed by now, they have each program has its own requirements. So if I'm missing if I'm not answering to some questions that are specifically related to programs, it's because of this. So because it will not be a reliable answer that I can give you without going into the university website and confirming the program. So let me see. So if your GPA is less than 3, what can you do? Usually there's not much you can do, Pedro. So if you have a GPA that it's not meeting the minimum requirement, and the same with the language, it will be very, very difficult for you to gain admission into the program. Usually when the universities state the minimum requirements, they are really the minimum requirements, meaning that if you have lower than that, it's very unlikely that you are able to gain admission into the program. The possibility would be that if by any chance you have a supervisor that already knows you or that would be really interested in working with you, he could eventually make a case so that you could be given a sort of a preferential condition, but that's something that very rarely happens. So Hector is asking, how is the process of applying to CONACYT in Mexico? So the becas from CONACYT, they open usually between March and they are open during several months. And for you to apply to a beca from CONACYT, you have to have an admission letter from the university, meaning that you need to have applied and received a letter saying that the program accepts you as a student. And it cannot have any condition outside of financial. So basically you need to meet all the requirements, the academic requirements, the references, everything needs to be in order so that you can then take that letter and apply to the CONACYT scholarship. Okay, so the first stage is actually to look for the admission from the university. Ugo is asking if it's possible to receive funding from Canada. It is, but our office does not handle these requests, so we would need to contact the university. So Viviane is asking how much time does it take a supervisor to answer, and how much time does it take the university to inform the student if they have been accepted. So once you submit your application, it might take several weeks until the university tells you how many students or which students were accepted. That usually depends on how many applications they received and also on the deadlines of the department. Some departments usually take longer than others. In terms of the supervisor to answer, like I mentioned, don't expect an answer less than 1 week, and then if nothing happens, follow up with the supervisor. Nadia is asking if she needs research experience to apply for a master. No, for a master, you don't need the research experience. As long as you have the licenciatura or the 4-year bachelor degree, you should be fine. So let me see other questions. So Yuri is asking if there's a problem in applying to a business program if your licenciatura is in electrical engineering. Not necessarily. So if for example you are an engineer that needs management skills, there are some programs called engineering management that are basically management programs for engineers. So you don't actually need to be applying to a business program. You would apply to one of these, which makes a bit more sense because they are more engineering related, but still keep a strong focus on management. So Rosario is asking if she can be accepted conditionally to the English. It depends, Rosario. So some programs might accept that while others don't. I know that, for example, in the University of Ottawa, that's not very common. So you need to present the minimum scores of English to gain admission. There is no conditional letters to the English. And that also, once again, depends on the different departments. So once again, we would need to check which university you're interested in program. So let me see what other questions are here. So Francisca is asking, she has some questions about the statement of research. You can send us an email, Francisca, and let us know what are your questions, and we will try to assist you. Hugo is asking, he's doing a PhD program, and if it's possible to do a visiting PhD or a sandwich PhD. Yes, it is possible, and you can do that usually between 6 and 12 months. And as long as you have a supervisor here that is interested in working with you, and all the financing have been arranged, you can then move on to do a visiting PhD in Canada. Viviane is asking, what do I think are the most important elements for a new university to accept a student? So Viviane, one big element is the fact that if the program is a research program, if you have a supervisor, that's a huge thing. Because if a professor is willing to work with you, that's a very good sign that your chances of admission are good. However, like I said, if you don't meet the minimum requirements, admission will be very difficult. So I would say that having a supervisor is very good, but meeting the minimum requirements is essential. So I would say that as long as you meet the minimum requirements, then you need to look for the supervisor. And if those two things are in place, then your chances of admission are pretty competitive, or at least your application is competitive. Let me see which other questions are here that I can reply right away. So Anna is asking how to be able to get a teaching assistant position. Teacher assistant are given to students by recommendation of professors. So the professor needs to know you to recommend you to be a teacher assistant. So basically, you need to provide evidence that you're suitable and able to teach, so that the professor can recommend you. So that's something that only happens after you're here, or if there's a professor that already knows you for working with you in your university, in your home country. Danielle is asking if I need a supervisor for a master. So if you're doing a thesis-based master, yes, you will need one. However, some programs do not require the supervisor at the application stage. Some only require it after you started your program. So just make sure that you know if the program that you're applying requires a supervisor at the application stage or only afterwards. Jose Alfredo is mentioning that if the program does not require thesis, if you need to go through all the process of the statement of research or contact the supervisor. No, if there is no research involved, the application process is only based on the admission requirements. So there's no need for contacting supervisors, which obviously takes a huge element out of the equation. So you just need to focus on your admission requirements, and that's it. Gustavo is asking if the application process is only online. Yes, Gustavo. So everything is done online on the university's website. So you don't do anything. Obviously, you don't need to come to Canada to apply. However, you will need to send some documents over the regular mail, because that's something that you will need. Mostly the transcripts will need to be sent via regular mail at some point. So you just need to make sure that you have more than one copy of the original document so that you can send it on the email. Christian is from Bolivia. So Christian, at the time being, we are not assisting candidates from Bolivia. So that's not yet a country for which CALDO has operations. So Angela is asking, she's going to have a title of general physician, but I want to apply a master in physiotherapy. Can it be possible for me to do it? So I'm not the most, I'm not the expert here on this question. So I would say that the only 100%, we can only have 100% certainty of your request if we contact the university. So we will need to contact the university that offers the program that you're interested in and see what they say. So Juan is asking about the scholarships in Canada. So the university, they offer scholarships. However, like I mentioned before, our office does not deal with this topic, so we are not able to provide you much more information. My suggestion is that if you're interested in getting financing from a specific university, just contact the department and ask them to provide you details on what are usually the benefits that the department offers international students in terms of scholarships. Juan is asking if there is any age limit to apply. So Juan, in theory there isn't, but in practice there may be, because if you have done your latest studies too long ago, it might be hard to find a supervisor that it's able to work with you. So let's imagine that you stopped studying, that your last studies were done 10 years ago or more. So probably it will be tough to find a supervisor that is interested in working with a candidate that has left the academic world for so long. Some scholarships, they do have requirements of age, depending on the country. So it's a mix of things. The age can influence in different ways. However, to apply to a program, usually you don't see any age requirement. So that's... So Alejandro, what are the benefits of studying in the University of the CALDO group? So this is a question that we reply in other webinars. So there are specific webinars about the CALDO Universities. However, I can give you an overview of some of the points that should make you consider one of the universities from CALDO. One of the first things to keep in mind is that all of these universities are considered research intensive. So they are specialists in research. And this basically means that they have professors from different parts of the world coming to our universities to do research, to teach about the research that they are doing. The universities have state-of-the-art laboratories in very different fields. Students have a lot of services that are available to them, things like academic writing, support services to find housing. So there are a lot of groups of students that exist in the universities to provide some support when you just arrive. So you might find in several of our universities group of students from Latin America, for example. And all of those things make the experience of studying in one of our universities something that is fostering basically the success of the student, because the overall goal is that all students are successful in their studies and achieve their degree in the minimum amount of time possible. So all of those things are basically some of the aspects that I would say should make you consider studying in a CALDO university. And also the CALDO universities are among the top universities in Canada. And the quality of study in Canada is very similar to what you find in the North America, so obviously in the US, but the costs are relatively more affordable than if you study in the US. So let me see. In the meantime, there were other questions here. So Louise is asking about the EduCanada fairs. Yes, the EduCanada fairs are some of the events that we participate when we are abroad, and those are definitely some of the events that you should check out in our website or Facebook to see if we are participating in the ones that are taking place in your home country. So Juan Carlos has finished his bachelor degree, however, the certificate is not yet ready. I have the transcript and I have a letter. So when you apply, you don't need a diploma, you just need the transcript, so this the constancia de notas. I know that in some cases the diploma takes several weeks or even months, but you don't need that. You just need the document that states your grades and the courses. So Jose Alfredo is asking the name and position. So Jose, you should contact us to graduate coordinator, and then the person, there are different people monitoring this box, this email box. So whoever gets your replies is able to assist you. So basically, you would then be corresponding with that person. Sebastian is asking, in Chile, university grades the final thesis for a degree that is part of the GPA. Yes, everything is part of the GPA. So the thesis is included. And usually what the universities do here is count the last 2 years of study, which should be equivalent to 60 credits, to calculate your GPA. So that's basically how they do it. So that's why you don't need to do anything. You just need to send your transcripts. So far I've answered most of the questions. In the meantime, as you can see on the screen, there's an email address there. So this is the email address where you should send questions that you may have afterwards. The presentation will be available on YouTube for further visualization. So if you're interested in knowing more about the CALDO Universities and about the programs, feel free to send us an email, and we will try to assist you the best way possible. From our end, we would just like to thank you for the time you took for being in this webinar, and we will be promoting further webinars in the next weeks. So we would like to invite you to participate in those webinars and get to know more about some of the details and some of the questions that you're asking. Because the webinars address different topics. So once again, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, and hope to see you soon in future webinars. Thank you.